The emergency beacon cut through the static like a knife, its desperate pulse echoing in the cramped cockpit of the stellar drift. Jackson Rivera adjusted his headset and squinted at the navigation display, watching the red dot blink insistently against the backdrop of Alaris IV's coordinates. "Another distress call," he muttered, running a calloused hand through his dark hair. "It's probably just another automated malfunction." But something about this signal felt different. Urgent. Real. The salvage business had taught him to trust his instincts. And right now, those instincts were screaming at him to investigate. He altered course, his ship's engines humming as they adjusted trajectory toward the abandoned mining outpost orbiting the red dwarf star. Elaris 4 had been evacuated. Months ago, when the mining operation went bust, leaving behind a skeleton crew to maintain basic systems, according to his records, even they had pulled out weeks ago. So who was sending the beacon? As the outpost grew larger in his viewport, Jackson could see the damage immediately. Meteor impacts had torn through the outer hull, and several sections were completely dark. Emergency lighting flickered sporadically along the docking bays, casting eerie shadows across the twisted metal. "Stellar drift to Alaris for control," he transmitted. "Responding to emergency beacon. Please respond." Static. He docked at the least damaged bay and suited up, checking his oxygen levels and emergency supplies. The outpost's artificial gravity was still functioning, but barely. He could feel the subtle fluctuations as he made his way through the darkened corridors, following his scanner toward the beacon's source. The signal led him to what had once been the residential section. Now it was a maze of collapsed bulkheads and twisted support beams. But there, buried under a mountain of debris, his scanner detected for life signs. Faint, but alive. "Hello?" he called out, activating his suit's external speakers. "Can anyone hear me?" A weak voice responded, speaking in accented but clear standard. "Here, ... we are here." Jackson began digging, his powered exoskeleton making short work of the smaller debris. But the heavier beams would require careful planning to avoid causing further collapse. As he worked, more voices joined the first, all distinctly feminine, all tinged with exhaustion and pain. It took 3 hours of careful excavation before he finally broke through to the pocket where they were trapped. His helmet lights illuminated for figures huddled together in what had once been a supply closet. For women with pale purple skin that seemed to shimmer faintly in the artificial light, they were clearly not human. But their basic anatomy was remarkably similar. Each had the standard 2 arms, 2 legs, and delicate features that would have been considered beautiful by any species standards. Their hair ranged from silver white to deep auburn, and their large, expressive eyes tracked his movements with a mixture of hope and wariness. "Don't worry," Jackson said, extending his hand toward the nearest one. A woman whose silver hair was braided with what looked like ceremonial beads. "I'm here to help. Can you move?" She accepted his help, her grip surprisingly strong despite her obvious exhaustion. "I am Vera," she said, her voice carrying natural authority even in her weakened state. "These are my sisters Linus, Kessa, and Zena." One by one, he helped them from the debris. Linus appeared to be some kind of medic, immediately checking the others for injuries with gentle, practiced hands. Kessa's clothes were stained with lubricants and metal shavings, an engineer, probably. And Xena, despite her obvious fatigue, moved with the fluid grace of a trained fighter. Back aboard his ship, Jackson activated the medical bay and helped them onto the examination beds. Their injuries were mostly minor cuts, bruises, dehydration. Nothing his automated systems couldn't handle. "You saved us," Vera said, as he handed her a nutrition pack and water tube. "We had given up hope." "Just doing what anyone would do," Jackson replied, checking Linus's vital signs on the monitor. "What were you doing on that station anyway?" "I thought it was evacuated." The 4 women exchanged glances, something passing between them that he couldn't interpret. "We were completing a mission," Vieira said carefully. "When the meteor struck, we became trapped." Jackson nodded, not pressing for details. Salvagers learned early not to ask too many questions about other people's business. "Well, you're safe now. I'll drop you off at the nearest Alaran colony when you've recovered." Are very kind, Lena said softly, her voice like music. Very, honorable. Something in her tone made him glance at her sharply. But she had already looked away, focusing on the medical scanner he'd given her to examine her own injuries, as his ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying him and his unexpected passengers toward safety. Jackson had no idea that his simple act of rescue had just changed his life forever. In the cargo hold, the 4 Elloran women whispered among themselves in their native tongue, their eyes bright with something that looked remarkably like anticipation. The first ritual was complete. 7 days after the rescue, Jackson was enjoying his first quiet morning in weeks when his ship's proximity alarms started screaming. Through the viewport of his orbital habitat station, he watched a sleek Illyron diplomatic vessel approach with the kind of ceremonial precision that made his stomach clench. Incoming transmission, his AI announced. Priority diplomatic channel. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing an elderly Illyran male in elaborate robes. His pale purple skin was marked with intricate tattoos that seemed to shift and flow like living art. Greetings, honored bondmate, the diplomat said, offering a deep bow that made Jackson's coffee mug freeze halfway to his lips. I am Ambassador Talos of the Illyran High Council. I come to offer the formal congratulations of our people on your successful 4-bond ritual. My what now? Jackson set down his mug with exaggerated care. Your bonding ceremony with the daughters of House Valthera. Most impressive, completing all 3 sacred acts in perfect sequence. The council is quite pleased with the match. Background: Jackson could hear the 4 women moving around his habitat's living quarters, their voices carrying the musical cadence of their native language. Since their rescue, they'd made themselves at home with an ease that had surprised him. Vera had reorganized his entire filing system. Linus had taken over his small garden, Kessa had improved half his equipment, and Xena had appointed herself his personal security detail. Ambassador Jackson said carefully, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I didn't perform any ritual, I just rescued them. Thalus's eyebrows rose. But that is precisely the point, young bondmate. The 3 sacred acts of primary claiming. First, the preservation of life in mortal peril. Second, the offering of first sustenance to the rescued. Third, the provision of sanctuary and shelter. He counted off on his fingers. You have fulfilled each requirement perfectly. Those were just basic human decency, Jackson protested. Perhaps to your species. 2 hours they represent the most solemn of commitments. You have claimed 4 daughters of noble blood as your bondmates. The ritual is recognized across 17 star systems and carries the full weight of interstellar law. The habitat's door chimed, and the 4 women entered the common area. They'd traded their damaged station uniforms for flowing garments in shades of deep blue and silver that complemented their unique skin tone. Jackson noticed how the fabric seemed to catch the light, making them appear almost ethereal. Ambassador Thalos, Vera said, offering the same formal bow. We are honored by your presence. The honor is mine, daughter of Valthera. I trust your bondmate has been... adequate in his care. All 4 women looked at Jackson with expressions he couldn't quite read. There was gratitude there, certainly, but something else, something warmer and more complex. He has been most generous, Lena said softly, her musical voice carrying undertones that made Jackson's pulse quicken. His kindness knows no bounds. Strength saved us all, Xena added. And there was unmistakable admiration in her golden eyes. Kessa stepped forward, her engineer's mind clearly working through the implications. The bonding is complete whether he intended it or not, but intention matters for the depth of the bond. Wait, hold on, Jackson interjected. Nobody asked me if I wanted to be bonded to anyone? Doesn't consent matter in your culture? Talos looked genuinely puzzled. But you gave consent through your actions. No Illyran male would risk his life for unknown females unless he intended to claim them. Your behavior was... unmistakable. In human culture, Vera explained gently, helping others is common even without romantic intent. The ritual has been completed, Jackson. The question now is whether you will accept us willingly or merely fulfill the legal obligations. The weight of their combined gazes settled on him like a physical thing. He looked from one to the other, seeing not just exotic beauty, but genuine emotion. Vera's leadership masked a vulnerability he was beginning to recognize. Linus's healing touch had become increasingly gentle during their brief interactions. Kess's improvements to his equipment showed a desire to share her life with his. Zaina's protective instincts had gradually shifted from professional to deeply personal. What exactly does this bonding entail? He asked carefully. Shared living space, mutual protection, emotional and physical intimacy as desired by all parties, Thalos explained. The bond can be deep or surface level, depending on the compatibility and willingness of those involved. And if I refuse? Women exchanged glances. You cannot refuse what has already occurred, Vera said quietly. But you can choose how to honor it. Some bonds are perfunctory. Others become the foundation of something beautiful. Jackson rubbed his temples, feeling the beginnings of a headache. A week ago, his biggest concern had been whether to take a salvage job in the Outer Rim. Now, he was apparently married. 4 alien women who looked at him like he'd hung the stars. I need time to think about this, he said finally. Of course, Thalos said, rising from his bow. The formal recognition ceremony can wait until you are ready. But know this. Young bondmate, the daughters of House Valthora, are among the most honored in our society. Many would consider you extraordinarily fortunate. After the ambassador left, an awkward silence settled over the habitat. The 4 women stood in his living room, suddenly looking uncertain, for the first time since their rescue. We know this is not what you planned, Vera said eventually. We can maintain separate quarters if you prefer. The bond does not require intimacy if you are unwilling. But we hope, Linus added softly, stepping closer, that you might find us ... acceptable companions. Jackson looked at them, really looked tanned, felt something shift in his chest. Weren't just obligations or legal complications. They were 4 remarkable individuals who had somehow become part of his life. Through a combination of coincidence and cultural misunderstanding. Let's start with getting to know each other better, he said finally. And maybe someone can explain why my coffee maker now produces something that tastes like liquid starlight. Kessa blushed, her purple skin darkening to a rich plum. I thought you might enjoy enhanced nutritional benefits, ... Despite everything, Jackson found himself smiling. Maybe this arrangement wouldn't be the disaster he'd initially thought. 3 weeks into their cohabitation, Jackson discovered that living with 4 alien wives was like trying to conduct an orchestra where everyone played different instruments and nobody agreed on the sheet music. Jackson Vera announced over breakfast, holding up a tablet displaying what looked like an architectural blueprint. I've optimized your sleep schedule and daily routines for maximum efficiency. You'll find the new schedule eliminates 3.7 hours of wasted time per day. Wasted time? Jackson asked, eyeing the color-coded chart with growing alarm. You mean like my morning coffee and reading the news? Precisely. Such activities can be incorporated into other tasks. For instance, your morning coffee can be consumed while reviewing salvage reports, and news can be absorbed during your exercise. Routine. Before he could protest, Linus appeared at his elbow with a concerned expression. Jackson, you've been favoring your left shoulder since yesterday. Please allow me to examine it. Her touch was gentle but thorough, her fingers finding tension points with practiced ease. What had started as a medical examination gradually became something more intimate. Her hands lingering longer than strictly necessary, her breath warm against his neck. Your muscle tension indicates stress, she murmured, her voice taking on that musical quality that made his pulse quicken. Perhaps a full-body massage would help. I'm fine, Jackson managed, though his body was already responding to her proximity. Really? A loud crash from his workshop interrupted the moment, followed by Kessa's excited voice. Success. Jackson, you must see this. He found her surrounded by the dismantled remains of his perfectly functional navigation computer, her face glowing with pride. In her hands was a device that looked like someone had crossbred a quantum processor with a kaleidoscope. I've improved your navigation system's processing speed by 847%, she announced. It can now calculate hyperspace jumps through 17-dimensional matrices simultaneously. Kessa Jackson said carefully, "That was my only navigation computer. How am I supposed to fly anywhere now?" Her confidence faltered slightly. "Oh, I did not consider that you might need the original system during the upgrade process." She bit her lower lip, an expression so genuinely apologetic that Jackson felt his irritation melting away. "But this new system is far superior once calibrated. And the calibration process should only take ... perhaps for days?" "For days," he repeated flatly. "5 at most," she added hopefully. A movement in the doorway caught his attention. Stood there in her usual position, close enough to intervene if needed, far enough to avoid crowding. Since their first day together, she'd made herself his unofficial guardian, and he'd noticed she never seemed to relax completely unless he was in her line of sight. "Perhaps," Zena said quietly, "could help you install the temporary backup system while Kessa completes her improvements." Her offer was practical and helpful. But Jackson caught the way her eyes lingered on his face, the slight flush to her purple skin when he smiled at her. Where the others were becoming increasingly forward with their affections, Zena remained reserved. But her emotions showed in small gestures, the way she positioned herself between him and any potential threat. How she insisted on testing his food before he ate. The protective stance she unconsciously adopted whenever strangers approached. "That would be great, thanks," he said, and watched her face light up with quiet pleasure. That evening, as they shared dinner in the Habitat's common area, Jackson found himself studying his unexpected housemates with new eyes. Vera's organizational obsession came from a genuine desire to make his life easier, even if her methods were sometimes overwhelming. Linus's medical attention was gradually becoming more personal, her touches more frequent and lingering. Improvements to his equipment were her way of trying to blend their lives together, making herself useful to someone she clearly cared about. And Zena's protective instincts had evolved from duty to something much deeper. "You're thinking very hard about something," Vera observed, setting down her fork. "Your expression has been contemplative all evening." "It's just adjusting to all the changes," Jackson admitted. "A month ago, I lived alone and liked it that way. Now, ... Now, you have 4 wives who are disrupting your carefully ordered life." Linus finished with a knowing smile. "Are we ... unwelcome disruptions?" Kessa asked, her voice small. The vulnerability in her question made something tighten in Jackson's chest. "No," he said honestly. "Different, but not unwelcome. Just trying to figure out how this is supposed to work." In traditional Illyrian culture, Vera explained, a 4-bond represents perfect balance. Each bondmate brings unique strengths that complement the others. "And what am I supposed to bring to this balance?" Jackson asked. "Stability," Zena said. "Immediately. You are the anchor that holds us together." "Kindness," Linus added. "You see our needs and respond to them without being asked." "Intelligence," Kessa chimed in. "You understand how things work, even when they're foreign to you." "Strength," Vera concluded. "Not just physical, but emotional. You make us feel safe." Their words hung in the air, and Jackson realized that somewhere in the past few weeks, these 4 women had stopped being an obligation and started being something else. He wasn't sure what to call it yet, but it was warm and complicated, and entirely outside his previous experience. "So what happens now?" he asked. Vera said, rising from her seat with graceful determination. "We continue learning about each other, starting with proper Alaran bonding customs, which are..." Jackson asked, though he suspected he already knew from the mischievous glint in her eyes. "Physical closeness," Linus said, moving to sit beside him on the couch. "Emotional intimacy, shared experiences," Kessa added, claiming his other side. "Trust," Zena concluded, settling on the floor at his feet in a position that somehow managed to be both submissive and protective. Surrounded by 4 beautiful women who looked at him with growing affection, Jackson felt his resistance crumbling. Maybe this bonding thing wouldn't be such a hardship after all. "Right," he said, surprising himself with the decision. "Teach me about Alaran bonding customs." The smiles they gave him in return were worth whatever complications lay ahead. The shift happened gradually, like the slow turn of seasons on a planet with a long orbital cycle. What had started as awkward cohabitation evolved into something deeper, more complex, and infinitely more intimate. It began with small moments. Vera falling asleep against his shoulder while reviewing cargo manifests, her usual rigid posture melting into something soft and trusting. Linus's medical examinations becoming extended sessions of gentle touch and whispered conversations about their respective worlds. Kessa seeking his opinion on her latest inventions, her face glowing with pride when he praised her work. Xena slowly opening up about her warrior training, sharing stories of her homeworlds. Martial traditions while they sparred in the Habitat's small gymnasium. The first real breakthrough came during a plasma storm that knocked out the station's main power grid. Emergency lighting cast everything in a red glow as Jackson worked frantically to restore life support systems. The backup generators were failing, and they had maybe an hour before the atmosphere recyclers shut down completely. "I can't reach the primary coupling," he called out, his arm wedged deep into the maintenance shaft. The connection is fused solid." "Let me try," Vera said, appearing beside him with a toolkit. But instead of taking over, she guided his hands to the right components, her body pressed against his back as she reached around him. "There, feel that. The coupling isn't fused, it's just over-tightened. Apply pressure here while I..." Working together, they managed to restore power just as the oxygen levels began dropping into the danger zone. In the aftermath, sitting on the floor of the maintenance bay with their backs against the wall, Vera looked at him with something new in her eyes. "You trusted me to help," she said quietly. "Even when it was dangerous, you knew what you were doing," Jackson replied. "Why wouldn't I trust you?" she smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face. "Because I have been... controlling. Trying to manage your life instead of sharing it." "Maybe a little," he admitted, and was rewarded with her soft laugh. "Perhaps," she said, moving closer, "we could find a better balance." When she kissed him, it was nothing like he'd expected. Not the calculated precision of her usual approach, but something warm and spontaneous and entirely Vieira. He kissed her back, tasting the sweetness of her lips, feeling the soft silk of her silver hair between his fingers. Was that ... acceptable? She asked when they parted, her usual confidence wavering. "More than acceptable," he murmured, pulling her closer. With Lina's intimacy came through her healing touch. A minor injury from a maintenance accident became an excuse for extended care, her hands glowing with the faint bioelectric field that was part of her species' natural healing ability. But as she worked, Jackson became aware that her touch was doing more than just mending torn flesh. "Your nervous system is fascinating," she whispered, her fingers tracing patterns along his bare chest. "So different from ours, but the responses are... Similar responses?" he asked, though his body was already answering the question. "Emotional resonance," she explained, her touch becoming more deliberate. "When I heal, I can sense what you feel, your pain, but also... other things." Her healing sessions became explorations of sensation and emotion, each touch carefully calibrated, to bring pleasure rather than just repair. She taught him about Alarin erogenous zones, the places where her pale purple skin was most sensitive, and he discovered that making her gasp with pleasure was as addictive as any drug. Kessa's breakthrough came when her latest invention, a holographic entertainment system, finally worked as intended. Her excitement was infectious as she demonstrated its capabilities, filling the common room with realistic projections of her homeworlds. Crystal forests and floating cities. "This is where I grew up," she said, gesturing to a towering spire of blue-green crystal. "And this is where I learned to engineer. My family's workshop was built into the crystal itself." The way she shared her past, the trust implicit in showing him her most cherished memories, moved something deep in Jackson's chest. When she looked at him with shining eyes, seeking his approval, he couldn't help but pull her into his arms. "It's beautiful," he said, "just like you." Her kiss was enthusiastic and slightly clumsy, all the passion of her inventor's mind channeled into physical expression. She tasted like the exotic fruits she favored, sweet and slightly tart, and when she pressed against him, he could feel the rapid beating of her heart. "I have been wanting to do that," she confessed breathlessly, "since the day you rescued us." With Xena, the moment came during one of their sparring sessions. She'd been teaching him aileron combat techniques, and he'd finally managed to execute a complex defensive sequence that had been giving him trouble for weeks. "Excellent," she said, her usual reserve cracking. "You moved like a true warrior there." Something in her praise, the respect in her golden eyes, made him bold. Instead of stepping back, he moved closer, backing her against the gymnasium wall. "What does a true warrior deserve?" he asked, his voice low. Her breath caught, but she didn't retreat. "Recognition," she whispered. "Honor. What about this?" He traced the line of her jaw with one finger, watching her pupils dilate. "Does a warrior deserve this?" "Yes," she breathed, tilting her face up to meet his kiss, where the others had been gentle or enthusiastic. Xena was fierce, matching his passion with warrior's intensity. Her strong hands gripped his shoulders, her body molding against his. With perfect fit, they broke apart, both breathing hard. She looked at him with something approaching reverence. "You are not what I expected in a bondmate," she said. "What did you expect? Someone who would require protection. Instead, I find someone who makes me feel ... protected." That night, for the first time since the bonding, all 4 women joined. Him in the Habitat's master bedroom. Not for anything rushed or desperate, but for closeness, for the intimacy of shared space and whispered conversations in the dark. "Is this what you want?" Vera asked, her voice soft in the darkness. "All of us together like this?" Jackson looked at the 4 faces surrounding him, Vera's silver hair spread across the pillow. Linus curled against his side, Kess's hand resting on his chest, Xena sitting protectively at the foot of the bed. A month ago, the situation would have seemed impossible, overwhelming. Now it felt ... right. "Yes," he said simply. "This is what I want." The smiles they gave him in return were radiant, and as they settled into sleep around him, Jackson realized that somewhere along the way his accidental wives had become something far more precious, his chosen family. The attack came without warning, as these things usually did. Jackson was reviewing shipping manifests when his proximity sensors screamed a warning, 3 ships dropping out of hyperspace, their weapon signatures painting his habitat with targeting. "Lox Alarin vessel," came the harsh transmission. "Surrender the fugitives or be destroyed." In the common room, his 4 bondmates froze. Vera's face went pale, while Xena's hand instinctively moved to where her weapon would normally hang. "Who are they?" Jackson demanded, but he already knew from their expressions that this wasn't random. "Korthok mercenaries," Vera said quietly. "They've been hired to retrieve us." "Retrieve you for what?" "Our father," Linus whispered. "Political marriages for us with the Hegemony Council. When we refused and escaped to complete our own mission, he declared us fugitives." Kessa finished. "The marriages were meant to secure mining rights to our family's asteroid holdings." Jackson felt rage boil up in his chest, nodded his bondmates. But at the situation that had made them flee their own home. "Well, they're not taking you anywhere, Jackson." "No," Xena protested. "These are trained killers. You cannot." "I can and I will," he said firmly, already moving toward the weapons. "Locker, you're my bondmates, my wives. Nobody takes what's mine." The conviction in his voice stopped all 4 women in their tracks. For the first time since their bonding, he wasn't reluctantly accepting his responsibilities, he was claiming them. 30 seconds to surrender, the mercenary captain transmitted. Counteroffer, Jackson replied, activating the Habitat's defensive systems. "Leave now, and I won't reduce your ships to scrap metal." The lead mercenary's laughter was harsh. "Habitat against 3 warships? You're insane." "Maybe," Jackson agreed, watching his tactical display as the enemy ship spread into attack formation.
Ow.
"But I'm also very, very good at what I do." The battle was brief, but intense. The Habitat's defensive systems, upgraded over the years with Salvaged military hardware proved more than adequate against mercenary-grade weapons. More importantly, his bondmates weren't helpless observers, they were partners. Vera coordinated their defensive strategy with military precision, directing power distribution and shield modulation. Lenice kept him functioning through the GI forces. And Stress, her healing touch, maintaining his reflexes and clarity. Kessa had apparently spent her weeks of improving his systems preparing for exactly this scenario. Every weapon fired faster. Every shield held stronger, every maneuver executed with impossible precision. And Xena, despite being in the middle of a space battle, somehow managed to protect him from the physical stresses while feeding him tactical information. When the dust settled and the surviving mercenaries were limping away in their damaged ships, Jackson found himself surrounded by 4 women whose expressions had shifted from gratitude to something much deeper. "You fought for us," Vera said. Wonder in her voice. "Not because you had to, but because you wanted to. Because you're mine," Jackson corrected. "All of you. And I protect what's mine." "Even though we brought danger to your home?" Linus asked. "Especially then?" At each of them in turn, "I'm done pretending this bonding was an accident or a legal obligation. I choose this. I choose all of you." What followed was unlike anything in Jackson's previous experience. The formal bonding ceremony, conducted via holographic link with Ambassador Thalos, was beautiful in its simplicity. But the private celebration, afterward, that was something else entirely. They came to him not as obligations or complications, but as partners, lovers, wives, in the truest sense. Vera's kiss was fierce with claimed desire. All her careful control dissolved into passion. Lenice's touch was both healing and arousing, her bioelectric abilities creating sensations no human had ever experienced. Kessa's enthusiasm was infectious, her inventive mind finding new ways to bring pleasure to them all. And Xena's warrior's strength was channeled into protective passion, fierce and tender in equal measure. "Are you certain about this?" Vera whispered as they moved together in the soft light of the Habitat's bedroom. "Once we complete the true bonding, there can be no dissolution." "I've never been more certain of anything," Jackson replied, pulling her closer. "You're not just my bondmates anymore. You're my family. My home." The night that followed was a revelation of intimacy and connection that went beyond the physical. Each woman brought her unique qualities to their union. Vera's leadership, Linus's healing, Kessa's innovation, Zena's protection, and Jackson discovered that he brought his own gifts, stability, acceptance, the ability to see their individual worth while appreciating their collective strength. In the quiet hours before dawn, as they lay entwined in the large bed, they'd expanded to accommodate their unconventional family. Jackson realized that his old life, the solitary salvager content with his own company, felt like someone else's memory. "No regrets?" Linus asked softly, her head resting on his chest. "Only one," he said, and felt them all tense slightly. "I regret that it took me so long to stop fighting this and start embracing it. Even though we disrupted your perfectly ordered life?" Kessa teased, her fingers tracing lazy patterns on his skin. "Especially because of that," he said. "I was just existing before, now I'm living." "And now you are ours," Xena said with satisfaction, "as we are yours." "Forever," Vera added, the word carrying the weight of a sacred vow. As the first light of the system's red dwarf sun began to filter through the viewport, Jackson looked at his 4 wives, no longer accidental, but Chosanon smiled. The salvage business had taught him to find value in things others considered worthless or lost. He'd never imagined that skill would apply to love, but here he was, surrounded by the most precious salvage of his life. Outside, the stars wheeled in their eternal dance, and somewhere among them lay adventures and challenges that would test their bond. But for now, in this moment, Jackson Rivera was exactly where he belonged, home, with the 4 extraordinary women who had transformed his life from solitary existence into something rich and full and beautiful. The bonding was complete, and it was perfect.